One, two, three.
Welcome to Scéalta. My name is Joe Austin. And can I remind you that Scéalta is a joint production of Virtual Féile here and Féile and Phobail. And that's a very appropriate beginning to any programme. For those who have the privilege or the honour of living in West Belfast, you will know by this stage West Belfast is abuzz with a conversation as to who's headline and Féile, who's going to be on, what the discussions are, who's coming here, the criticism, too many debates, not enough music, not all of that. That buzz engulfs West Belfast at this stage. And the man behind that buzz is my guest today, is Kevin Gamble, who's the director of Féile. Before I come to you, Kevin, can I say that Féile has been blamed for everything, from the weather to immaculate conceptions, to job losses, to sore heads, to broken marriages, to engagements, and to a considerable amount of births. But we won't go into that. So, for those who don't know you, tell us a wee bit about yourself.
Yes, so first of all, Joe, delighted to be part of Scéalta. It was always a pleasure to talk to yourself. Suppose strange surroundings and the times we're in now, we're doing this via Zoom as opposed to face to face. And while it's always nice to see your face, it does feel strange doing an interview like this at Féile time, and usually the whole buzz around the community. You've hundreds of people in rooms, you're talking to the media daily, you're briefing colleagues, you're talking to friends, you're telling your family all about what's coming up at Féile. But I suppose just a wee bit about me to start then. I don't usually like talking about myself, so feel free to stop me at any stage if I sound a wee bit egotistic here, or if I'm not saying the right things. But believe it or not, I'm only 38 years young. I know I might look sometimes a wee bit older, or sometimes I behave a wee bit younger, but 38 years young. I'm a family man, married to Danielle, who I would describe as a superwoman, as a super mum. I have 6 young kids, all under the age of 9. Jude, Ben, Oscar, Jonah, Georgia, and Finn. So ranging from 9 years of age down to our youngest boy, Finn, who's going to be coming 2 here in August. I still play senior hurling for my sins, which hopefully keeps me young and fresh looking, Joe, as you commented earlier. I play handball for St Paul's. I've represented Antrim at many levels across a number of different sports. And I'm also an active coach with St Paul's in terms of volunteering my time outside of work and outside of playing, with managing and coaching underage teams from under 10 hurling and Gaelic football. And all my own kids play for St Paul's now too, which is great. And I'm sort of seeing that passage of time from, when my father brought me up to St Paul's for the first time, holding my hand, to me doing that now with my own family. And it's heartening when you see that sort of passage of time, and where you looked up to people, you can now see little people looking up to you. So I suppose that's me in a very small nutshell in terms of a personal side.
My introduction was, of course, as always, over the top. Féile isn't responsible for everything. It's responsible for a whole lot, but not for everything. And according to Stephen Nolan, it has been a catastrophe. The world nearly ended because Féile is successful every year, and more successful every year, which I'm sure causes them some concern. But I have discovered in my journeys that people have begun to date their life around Féile. So, for instance, when people are talking about a particular event, they go, who was headlining Féile that year? Oh yeah, yes, that was that year. And I myself, I have a granddaughter, my oldest grandchild, was born the night the status quo were playing. So I date her birth, not by her birthday, but who was playing on Féile that particular night. When you were growing up, of course, Féile was already in existence. This is, I think, the 32nd
32nd year, yeah.
A year of Féile. Had you, apart from, I'm assuming you attended Féile, but did you ever, for instance, see yourself as being the man behind the machine that runs Féile? Did you have any aspirations for that?
I suppose, looking back, Joe, no is the honest answer. I mean, I never see myself as being that. I don't think you can when you look back. It's foresight's a great thing, and when you're sitting here looking back with hindsight, then you're thinking, what path led me to where I am today, and You know, being the director of Féile, I find is a very privileged and it's a big honour for me to have that job. It's probably one of the biggest and one of the most well-known jobs in Belfast, you know, even outside our own community of West Belfast, and to be that sort of figurehead. And I'm only one person in the Féile team, as you know, Joe, as someone who's involved in some of our committees. You know, there's tens and twenties of people who are involved on a daily basis, helping to pull Féile together. We have a small staff team of 6. I just happen to be the figurehead of that team. But there's hundreds of volunteers who come together every year to make Féile the success that it is. And we're all proud to play a wee small part in that. And I suppose when you're talking about, I know you were joking about some of the memories of Féile, and people kind of date march their, you know, where it was a birth of a child or a marriage or whatever in their life in terms of when Féile. I can always remember my first sort of recollection of Féile. Was a good friend of mine, John O'Carroll, from St Paul's, who you might know, who used to work for Féile way back in the day, putting up the marquees and stage management and security. And we always used to try and sneak down and try and sneak in. Probably we were about 11 years of age, if not younger than that. And John always found a way of allowing St Paul's ones to sneak through the cordon. Now we had to stand at the back and very clearly out of sight. And the minute anyone was misbehaving, you know, John literally frog marched us back up the road. And he was sure to see you the next day to give off about it. But there was always that sense that Féile was for everybody. And there was always an event. I mean, even if you remember back to the street parties that happened literally in every street across West Belfast, I suppose that was probably my first introduction to Féile. You were going out into your own street. You know, you would have heard music playing. There was adults, kids, cousins, families, all coming from all over. And you were nearly in competition with the street next to you to see who would have the best street party. And in one sense, that was my wee first sort of glimpse of there's something going on in this community. There's a carnival atmosphere, people are out having fun, there's enjoyment. And going back to that time, you know, obviously there was a conflict still on at that stage. It seemed to be, you know, there was a bit of peace and quiet at that time. Things seemed to be a wee bit normalised. People were out in the street, you were confident going out, you were walking the other neighbourhoods that perhaps you wouldn't have done, you know, during normal times. And Féile always seemed to bring that sort of sense of norm and hope and progress and communities coming together, and you just kind of felt that as you were playing as a kid running about the street. And then I suppose as I got older and started to venture a wee bit more outside of my own area, you know, you were going down to the big concerts, you were going to the Gator race in the Falls Road, you were getting into the talks and debates, you were seeing theatre plays in your local bars, and you know, it really was just an easy way to get involved. But I always found now when I'm looking back, I probably wasn't aware that Féile was happening when I was younger. You were aware of the street parties, yes, but you weren't aware of this, you know, this big machine that literally goes in the overdrive during those 10 days of August, and the work that goes on in the background. And I think it's only when you're in the middle of it all, you actually see the amount of work and effort that goes into doing it, that just you can sit back and realise that, you know, the people who came before you and the people who will no doubt come after me, it's a massive task, and there's a massive expectation on the Féile team every year and on our community, I suppose, to produce a festival of this size. And you know, we are known now as the biggest community festival in Ireland. We welcome over 100,000 people into West Belfast for those 10 days of August. You know, over 400 events. We use about 40 or 50 different venues, and there's literally something on from everyone, from a toddler right up to someone as young as yourself, Joe. And I always say, you know, to our own team, and any time I'm being interviewed, you know, we're only sort of minding the jersey. You know, we're the custodians of this great organisation, of this great vehicle that is Féile. And as I said, it's an honour to be there at this stage. And I think the job of people like me and the committees that help pull Féile together is to make sure that we keep Féile in the place that it is. We keep being relevant, we keep pushing the boundaries, we keep opening our community up to the wider world and inviting people in so they can really see who we are, what we're about, how proud we are, how talented we are, and all of that. And then if and when the time comes to leave, that we've left it in a better place than what we found it. And the next people come on, then we would be, you know, we are happily passing on that baton.
I know from experience, and you're right, I've been directly and indirectly associated with Féile for a while. Not least of all because I live in West Belfast. But for many people who arrive at an event, be it in St Mary's or be it, you know, somewhere else, they don't understand, they don't need to understand, although it's quite good that people appreciate the amount of work that goes on behind the scenes to produce any event. and it's meticulous, from the bottles of water to the grate, the meat, to the seats, to all that stuff. It's checked, it's double checked, it's rehearsed, it's went through. And last year, I mean, I was part of the team that met every morning over breakfast to go through all the things. And they range from waterlogged pitches to insurance policies to spot inspections from the health people to a tantrum of some group coming from overseas to play, all of that stuff. What prepared you to, I know you're very mindful that you're part of a team, and you are part of a team, but the buck stops with you, comrade. And that's the truth of the matter, and I've seen that at first hand. So what prepares you to move in to that sort of operation? What did you do before you came to Féile?
I don't think you can ever be prepared for a job like Féile, to be honest, but obviously the experiences that you gain through life can always stand you in good stead. And again, surround yourself with good people. But I mean, before I came to Féile, Joe, my initial sort of path in life was going around a sport development and a sports science route, where I was very heavily involved in terms of university. And my first sort of couple of work placements were involved in sport development, which again was done through community development, but we just used sport as a vehicle to get young people off the streets, to get events happening in inner city neighbourhoods, and to tackle some of the inequalities that we were seeing in some of our communities and areas, and doing that through sport. But even before that, I wanted to be a sports scientist, and I always thought I had quite a good analytical brain, and I was able to analyse things and plan and organise as you would have to in terms of when you're looking at data and you're trying to work with athletes and so on. So I suppose a wee bit of that background, a degree in sport and exercise science. I done my MBA in business development and management, and I suppose all the wee sort of experiences that I've had through different jobs. I worked in the Upper Springfield Development Trust. I worked out in Brownlow, just outside Craigavon there. Have all sort of kind of moulded my way of managing people, experiences, events, and programs as such. And while it's very hard to just put your finger on one thing that kind of helps you in this job, I think it's nearly a collation of all of that. Your life experiences. I mean, how you were brought up. I mean, we were brought up immersed in our own community, immersed in community politics and Irish language and cultural events, and all of that I think kind of steered me in towards Féile. That sort of whole sense of doing something good for your community, and you learn from other people around you. I mean, I'm a very strong believer in sitting back and watching people develop and picking things up from different people, whether that's people like yourself, Joe, who have obviously been there and done it, and worn the clothes, or just watching other people, how they work, and picking the nuances of things that you think you can bring into your own work life. And I suppose I've just tried to do a wee bit of all that through my education, my life experiences, my work experiences, and the person that I am, which is someone who's very much rooted in their own community, and wants to see their own community doing well. In one sense, has helped me be the organizer of this big event. I don't know if that sounded right the way I tried to explain that, but I hope you got the gist of that.
Yeah. And I think that's part of, if you don't mind me saying, so in many ways, Féile is the victim of its own success, because it doesn't trip up very often, or when it does, when things happen, that team spirit, that kind of nearly finger on the pulse, you get it resolved as quickly as you can. And I'm going to ask you two questions. So, all that operation that goes on behind the scene. So, Féile of last year has finished. When does the planning for this year's Féile begin? What time of the year do you start it?
Well, to be truthful, I mean, the planning for the following year's Féile, when you're in the middle of Féile, has already started. I mean, we've just launched our Féile for this year, which will be a virtual festival. And we started the planning of that, which back in 2019 wouldn't have been a virtual festival. So as we launched our festival, Joe, in 2019, we'd already had plans in place in terms of some of the big events, some of the acts we were trying to get, some of the speakers we were trying to bring over for 2020. You nearly have to be at least a year ahead of yourself in terms of that planning, because there's other festivals, there's other events, there's other places in the world that all these people we are trying to get to come into West Belfast have plans to go to. So with any sort of planning, and particularly with a major event, the earlier you can get your plans in place and get all those sort of different irons in the fire, the quicker you can start nailing down concrete events that are over the line as such. So even this year, as we've just launched our virtual festival, we're already speaking to artists for next year in 2021. And you're always that kind of 9 months to a year ahead of yourself in terms of your planning. And the frustrating thing, I suppose, for organisations, particularly here, I find, is that while we have all the best plans in place, we're led very much by the bureaucracy of some of the governance that we have to go through in terms of being able to draw our funding down in time to get speakers in, to get plans passed by council and so on. But that doesn't stop the work in the background. Our committees literally meet on a daily basis, 24/7, 12 months of the year, and they voluntarily take Christmas off. Other than that, I think they would work right through Christmas Day to make sure that the following year is always bigger and better than the previous year. And that expectation, Joe, to be fair, is in one sense we put it on ourselves. We always try and make sure that the next year is bigger, but I think we've got to feel at this stage now where that's what the community expect. They expect us always to go one better. And we always find ourselves after August when we do our debrief going, how do we beat that? How do we go one better than what we've just done there? And through, again, our experiences, the contacts that we have right across the world in the different industries, and the talent that we have within our volunteer pool, our own community and our staff team, we always manage to do it by hook or by crook. The following year is usually always better than the previous year. And that's what we always aim to do.
I want to come in just by way of an insight. This interview will cover some of that, and we've a long way to go in the discussion today. But this book that Féile brought out, Féile 30, people should get it and read it. It's an excellent insight into the workings of Féile. In fact, it's an excellent insight into how you personally direct Féile. And it's something I think that people should read to get a sense of the broadness of the Féile family and what Féile really is trying to do on a yearly basis. So you talked about bigger and better and getting there bigger and better. And Féile has thousands of supporters, thousands of fans, and it also has the Thursday evening pub critic, the person, man or woman, that goes, yeah, UB40, never heard of them. Yeah, never heard of them, right? Tell me and tell us if you can. So you mentioned that there are other festivals that are taking place in and around the same time, that there's a competition for artists, for experts, for discussions, for debates. So if I can maybe break it down. So the entertainment end of Féile.
Yeah.
How do you get a group like UB40? What physically? What do you have to do?
Well, I mean, in its simplest terms, you just have to ask. I mean, I think we always used to sit back and go, we're not big enough to go after these big bands. We don't have the contacts. But over the years, so you build relationships with other festivals, with people involved in the music industry, with agents, with managers of bands, and so on. And you literally just have to ask. I mean, you sit on the phone, you email all day long for weeks on end without getting an answer. And sometimes when you do get an answer from an agency, being honest, they're saying, Féile, what is Féile? Is it a music festival? But some people find hard to get is Féile is much bigger than just a music festival. Music is one small element of our festival. And so we're not really seen out there as a festival of music. And that sometimes makes it difficult for us to attract those big stars, who would know their, your Tenants Féile type events, your Creamfields, those big music event names that resonate around the world. Féile isn't that. That's a stage, and that's not what we want Féile to be either. But when we are trying to attract those big bands, what we have found over the last number of years is that because we have grown the festival so much now, that it is on people's ears. People have heard of the festival now, and some of that is down to just literally the sheer graft that our team of volunteers have been doing by literally, polluting people's emails with requests to come and play. And you sometimes find even, Joe, that you may have a contact that you don't realise has a contact with a band. So I might know you for talk's sake, and you just might happen to say, in conversation, oh, by the way, I know the fellow who works with the Kaiser Chiefs. And then I'm going, Joe, you've known me for 20 years and you've never once mentioned that. We've been trying to get the Kaiser Chiefs for 10 years, Kaiser Chiefs for 10 years. And then all of a sudden you have a way in. And we have found that over the last number of years that people who are very close to Féile, or people who are from West Belfast, or people who have, moved out of West Belfast and they're living, whether it's in Europe or in the States or in Britain, and who are involved in different wee networks that have different wee networks attached to them, who are now coming back to us to say, by the way, I bumped into the manager of UB40, would just be interested. And instead of us having to knock doors down and send, countless emails, we're now getting requests into the office for people to come and play Féile, for people to come and speak at Féile, which is literally, night and day from where it was when we first started.
That was the point I was going to ask you. While there would have been a difficulty, I would imagine, in the perception of Belfast and West Belfast a while ago, is there still the remnants of that when you're trying to approach these groups, like a fear factor? Do people, still?
Yeah, and I think, again, being honest, there is. Now, probably 1 out of 10, Joe, would come back and ask you, what's it like in West Belfast still? And I remember being over in the States, excuse me, a number of years ago, at a festival, Milwaukee Irish Festival, with one of our colleagues, Harry Connolly from Falls First here, where we go each year to promote West Belfast as a tourism destination, and obviously Féile is a big part of that. And I remember someone saying, what's it like? Is the war still going on? And we were just flabbergasted and going, what? You've not heard the news, you've not, ceasefire, all of that. And it kind of took me aback a wee bit, and they were saying, well, where is West Belfast? Is it west of Belfast, or is it in Belfast? And me and Harry were looking at each other, trying to work out, are these people on the same planet? But yes, there is that perception there, to answer your question, both from a public perception, but also when you get into that professional entertainment industry. I mean, particularly if you're going for those bigger bands, they ask for as much information as possible about your organisation, about the area they're playing in, about previous people who have played the festival. And 1 out of maybe 5, would ask you, is there any sense of trouble if we go over there? We've seen images of the bonfires on the 12th of July. We've seen rats on the streets. We've seen all sorts of things going on. Can you guarantee this won't be happening during this time? And to be fair, we usually send them then a wee briefing note if you're not speaking to them on the phone, which really shows why Féile came to be in existence, which was to try and displace all of that negative activity that was going on in terms of bonfires and niceness in Republican areas, in terms of young people being on the street, in terms of the strafe and all that went with it. And I think once people read that and they get that reassurance, plus when we send them the list of people who have played at the festival previously, it puts them at ease. But yes, there is that wee perception there still sometimes it creeps in that Belfast isn't a safe place to come to.
I suppose, just as a matter of nearly a sidebar issue, are there demands that are made by some of the people who are the guests of Féile that are there some demands that are more bizarre than others? Sure. And if there are, can you give us an example?
I need to be very careful what I say.
Yes,
here.
I know, that's why I'm being tactful.
So, I mean, all bands and most people who are coming to the festival would send what is called a rider. And what that is a list of demands for what they want, or requests, I suppose. Let's play nice with these people. It's requests that they ask for when they arrive. And they can be as little as, fruit juice, a bowl of fruit, a plate of sandwiches and a couple of beers in the fridge, to what we've had in the past. And particularly if you think of some of the big names that came to Féile, and it's usually more the music end as opposed to somebody who's coming to deliver a lecture or do a piece of theatre for us. And they've asked for a specific bottle of whiskey, or a specific bottle of brandy, or a specific flower, or a specific sort of type of mirror. And it literally says at the bottom, if this is not provided, the band will refuse to play. And I've seen us, Joe, and I'm here now, this is my 10th year. And last year, to be fair, was probably one of the only years that we haven't run the different parts of this island to try and find something that just isn't in, Sainsbury's down the street, or isn't in the local off license. You literally have to sometimes travel, 100 miles to find something that these artists are demanding. But what we've learned as well, and I suppose this is one of the wee tricks in the industry once you're in it for a while, a lot of these demands are made by the artist's management team, not by the artists themselves. And you find when the artists arrive, they've been blown away by the amount of hospitality that's put on for them. And I remember very specifically around 4 years ago, and just because we were getting all these mad requests for, brandy that you can only get in a certain place, and a piano that was only available in County Cork one year that we had to, we had put plans in place to transport it up, and then we ended up finding that the BBC had one just around the corner, so we were able to get that. But we actually sat down with one of the artists and said, listen, have a look at your radar. Is that what you present at every single festival you go to? And he was blown away by it. He says, I didn't even know what's on that thing. That is sent by our management team. I'm happy to get a sandwich and a couple of bottles of beer, and that the crew are looked after, after the event. So what we have started to do now is once we get those raiders in, we more or less look to see what's realistic here for us to, one, go and purchase, because this is all on top of the fee that the bonds, etc. get. This is all additional costs. So we usually look to see, well, what's reasonable and what can we stretch to do, and what would we be happy to provide, and that's what we provide. And we haven't had one agent or one manager come in and say that specific fan wasn't there, or that specific radiator wasn't in the room, or there was no shower facility or whatever. So in one sense, it's a bit of paper that you're handed blankly that you're not expected. Now, I don't think to deliver on as much as what we thought when we first started receiving them, but the range go from a page long to 20 pages long.
I'm going to ask you the question, which you probably won't answer, and it's a question that most people would expect me to ask, and you won't answer it, I assume, because of contractual responsibilities. Some of these, and let me just refer to what's in my head. I asked you one morning during these morning meetings when Féile is taking place, what a certain group charged. Yep. And you said, what little hair you have in your head will be gone if I told you. So we're really talking about massive amounts of money. And is that part of the reason why there are just occasions when you have no option but to charge a limited amount of money? So we're talking in occasions 80, 90, upwards £1,000. Would that be fair?
For artists, yes, Joe. I mean, I suppose sometimes the frustrating thing when we're sitting as a staff team pulling events together is we do sometimes get a wee bit of criticism in terms of ticket prices for some of the events. And we bear in mind 90% of our program is free, probably 95% of it is free. The only events that we charge into are the concerts, and it's simply because you couldn't afford to bring these big names in to West Belfast without paying the going rate. They don't charge us a cheaper rate because we're a community festival or because we have less people in the audience. They charge a flat rate, most times. And if it's not a flat rate, then it's based on your capacity. And if you compare us, for example, to the likes of the Odyssey Arena, so if we have 15,000 people in the Falls Park, we'll be paying the exact same amount of money that a band is being paid to play the Odyssey Arena, no cheaper. What we've been able to do is to try and trim some of that cost off through sponsorship and funding that we bring in, so that we don't pass that full cost on to the public. And Féile doesn't make a profit. Féile is not in the business of making a profit the way that private festivals and commercial festivals are. So we try and put these big names on for as little money as possible. But in the 10 years that I've been in Féile, we've paid bands anything from £20,000 up to over £200,000, and people just don't see that. And it's not something that you would fire out there. You don't say, Joe Austin's coming to Féile this year and he charges £10,000 to speak, because you just don't do that. That's not the way the industry works. But there nearly needs to be that realization that if you're going to the biggest festival on this island, if you're seeing UB40 in your backyard, or if it's the Wolf Tones, or it's one of the big dance DJs that come, but they all come with a massive price tag. Our job in the office is to try and keep that price tag as low as possible for our audience and for our community, to make sure that they have access to these people as cheaply as possible. And we always do try and keep our ticket prices, under £20 if we can. I mean, people were seeing UB40 at Féile a number of years ago for a tenner, and if you went to see them in the Odyssey the same year, you were paying £40 or £50 for a ticket. Yet some people were still, criticising us for having a ticket at £10, and sometimes you can't win. But I think by and large the community respect the effort that goes into bringing these big names, and I think there is a realization that they all do come at a big cost. I just don't think people realise how big that cost is.
Well, that's why I made the point earlier on that you are in many ways the victim of your own success. So you're a community festival, and that to some degree means you're community accountable as well. I just wanted to cover that because I remember the conversation. Monday seen the launch of this year's Féile, and what struck me was the workings out of a conversation that I've heard you at meetings expressing over a number of years. And your very quick explanation as to who you are. You talked about your passion for the GAA. You have a passion for the language. I know that you're a great defender of our new citizens. Those people have came here through the harshest of conditions from overseas. And Monday's seen that reflected in this program. So just tell us a wee bit about the program as we are approaching, and explain for those who maybe don't, well, they would know that there's a lockdown and they would know all of that, but so how difficult was it to get where you are with this year's Féile?
To be honest, Joe, it wasn't as hard as maybe we thought initially when we heard that there was, the whole island was going into lockdown. I think that first day we heard that, we were, there was maybe panic stations because we'd already got 90% of the festival planned. We'd about 400 events nailed down. We'd contracts in place with artists, with speakers, with venues booked, with insurance in place, with all those types of plans in place. And with very little notice, they were all literally upended, and we had to start again with a blank sheet. But I think first and foremost, the most important thing for us was that we had to do a festival. In the 32 years of the history of Féile, literally since 1988, and regardless of what was going on around us in terms of the environment that we were in, the festival always took place. And we didn't want it to be on our watch that there would be no festival. And the next phase then was to try and work out how do you physically put a festival of the scale of Féile on without having anybody attending it, and without physically being able to bring people together. So we started to look at the idea of doing a digital festival, and what that entailed. And to be honest, Joe, I can remember we put out, I think it was either a tweet or something on Facebook saying Féile is going virtual in 2020. And we didn't understand what virtual was. We had no idea what a virtual festival was or how it would be put together. But we set our minds to doing it. We brought in a number of people again. We tried to use expertise that we knew within, people who worked with IT, people who worked in digital technology, people who worked building websites, to try and give us a wee sense of the task that was ahead of us. And this was probably back, we were just finishing our March festival, Féile in Yari, when this all sort of kicked off. And probably from about the third week of March, we started to put the plan in place to, I suppose, nearly deconstruct the program that we had in place, and then reconstruct it in a smaller format that would all be able to be manageable to go online. And what I mean by that is aesthetically, Joe, we had to make sure we were putting events online that they look good online, they sounded good online, and that reputationally for Féile and for our own community that we put something on that people could be proud of. Because we say every year at the end of Féile, were we proud of that? And the answer is always yes. So we had to make sure that whatever we were doing this year had that same sort of stamp mark of Féile, and it had Féile all over it in terms of the quality of the events that we were producing. So we literally took around 400 events, shaped it down to about 100 events, and that's right through all the ranges, Joe. So you've theatre events, you've youth arts, you've community events, you've music concerts, you've talks and debates, you've tours and walks, you've a whole visual arts programme, all going online, going virtual, which is the word we're using now. And all we literally really had to do was to get the buy-in of those people who are involved in putting those events together. So the speakers that we were trying to get and bring them, over to St Mary's College, which we usually do every year. We had 87 talks and debates planned to happen in St Mary's. And the minute we got the news of this, we had to cut that right down to something that was more manageable, which is now turned into around 37 live events virtually, with about another 10 or 20 events getting into our virtual library, which I'll maybe talk a wee bit about later on. But what we found very encouraging was that those people who were involved in those events, where it was a speaker or an artist, their answer straight away was yes, I'll do it virtually for Féile. We want to be part of this great festival. And in a roundabout way, some of the people who we've been chasing for years and haven't been able to get, it was easier to get them to do a digital event for us. Because it's similar to what we were doing now, Joe. Someone could be sitting in their own house and doing a world-class quality talk or a music concert for us. And for the last number of years, we haven't been able to bring them into Belfast for, they may have been on holiday in August usually, they may have been, a different part of the world at another festival, but things all just seemed to click into place. And very quickly we were able to sort of, come up with 100 to maybe 120 events that we know would work well. So for the virtual Féile this year, you're literally going to be able to watch events from 10 in the morning through to 10 at night, from the 30th of July right through to the 9th of August. And again, as we always say, there's something in Féile for everyone. So, most mornings are starting off with like a health and fitness and sporting activity, and then you're leading into the afternoon where you have some of your talks and debates, some of your theatre, your exhibitions, the virtual tours. So Tom Hartley, who will kill me if I don't give him a shout out during this, does probably the most popular tour during Féile every year in the cemetery. And he's been doing that for years, Joe, and I know he's a good friend of yourselves, and one of the founders of Féile. and Tom was probably one of the first ones that we found a wee bit of difficulty with convincing of this virtual sort of element of the festival, and probably just because, like us at the time, he didn't understand what it entailed. So we had one of our colleagues, Tony, who went out and literally walked around the cemetery tour with Tom with a video camera and filmed Tom doing that. So instead of having to walk and do Tom's 3-hour tour, you'll now be able to sit in your own home and watch it virtually for 1 hour. So you'll do a quick snap of it. And the whole reason behind that, Joe, is to nearly put that in the shop window for next year, that people get a wee glimpse of what Féile is about from the comfort of their own homes, and then they'll want to take part in it next year. So, you know, one of the biggest challenges was to make sure that the virtual festival is as accessible as possible. And what we mean by that is, you know, somebody from 10 years of age to somebody at 90 years of age has to know how to click on and watch these events. So we're going to be doing them through our social media channels, through our website. And it literally will be as easy as sitting down and clicking a button, whether that's on your phone, on your iPad, on a PC, or on your TV. And you'll be able to, as I say, sit in the comfort of your own home with your family, with a drink or over dinner or whatever, and enjoy the festival just as you would if you were there. You can't replace that atmosphere of actually being live at an event, and in no way we want to do that. But we just want to give people that sense that the Féile is here, it's happening, be part of it, engage in it, experience the, you know, some of the quality events that we have there. And by the way, next year, come back in person.
I know that you are never biased, and every event is a brainchild of someone. But is there something that, or is there a grouping of things that jump out at you that you could say, hand and heart, don't miss this. This is unique. So try and go to that.
Yeah, again, I think every year, Joe, the talks and debate section of Féile every year is, you know, a mixture between groundbreaking, politically edgy, it's pushing boundaries, it's challenging, it's entertaining, it's educational, it's all of that. And this year, I think, to be fair, we probably put together one of the strongest elements of a debates and discussion programme. And I say, I think it's helped that the festival hasn't been able to happen physically, because some of the people that we've attracted this year, we just wouldn't have been able to get if it was a normal festival time. So this year, and I'll just give you a couple of examples, we have Noam Chomsky, who's going to deliver a talk for us. And the last time we had Noam Chomsky here, I can't remember the year, it was over 10 years ago anyway. We actually had to piggyback on another event that was happening in the city to get him up the R event. And for 10 years since then, we've literally phoned him every year. And Bill Rosen, who chairs our debates and discussion group, has a very good relationship with him, and we've begged him every year to come back and do an event like that, because it was probably the biggest ever event at the time that Féile had done in terms of the crowds of people that turned up to listen to him. And for whatever reason, year after year, it was always a no, I can't get over to Belfast, I can't make it. Whereas this year, Bill lifted the phone to him the minute we knew we were going virtual, and he said, I'd be delighted to do it. And we're really, really looking forward to that event. We've also got other, you know, David McWilliams, one of the sort of main economic commentators at the minute, who has been a Féile in the past, and played the sold out crowd in St Mary's, is coming back this year to do a virtual event. Yanis Varoufakis, who most people should know as the previous Greek economy minister, is doing a virtual event for us. And people like that. I mean, with Senator Neil Richmond from the US, very highly powered politician in the States, came to us this year and asked you to be part of this virtual Féile because it's easier for him to participate. It's something that he's watched at length for a number of years, and we've been able to secure the likes of him to do a virtual event for us. So in one way, so the virtual Féile this year will, I think, elevate the debates and discussions to another level, and it also allows us to reach, I think, probably a bigger international audience, because again, we're going to have people tuning in from all parts of the world to see these programs of events that otherwise, you know, wouldn't have happened. And one of the learnings that we've got out of having to bring the festival virtual this year is that we should always have an element of virtual or digital every year now as part of Féile. So as if you are sitting in your house, and whether you're in Cape Town in South Africa, or whether you're in the United States, or whether you're in Dublin, you don't necessarily have to come up, but you can still participate and engage. But, you know, albeit we want to see you here in person.
You mentioned that mammoth program of activity, virtual as it may be, but it's activity nevertheless. Will there be a hard copy program this year?
The program won't be in hard physical form, because again, we're trying to embrace this digital world now, Joe. So what you'll be able to do is go onto our website and go through the program digitally. So you'll literally flick through it, click on the events through the website.
Let me stop you there, Kevin. Just take people through that. So how do they get on to the Féile website? What do they do? What do they have to do?
Yep, so very simply to access the program, go on to féilebelfast.com, and there'll be very just clear instructions in terms of click to download the virtual Féile digital program. So you can either watch it on your actual website, Joe, in front of you, or you can download it as a PDF, you know, if you want to read it, you know, sort of separately. And I know some people do like paper in their hands. If you download it as a PDF, you can have the option of printing it if you know you want to flick through it like that. But to be fair, I've seen the digital program and how it works digitally. It's fantastic. And again, I think it just brings Féile to another level in terms of how people can interact with the program. And one of the criticisms, Joe, we get every year, even though the program I think looks brilliant every year, it's very hard and confusing just because there's so many events from, you know, page 1 to page 200 usually. Whereas this year, I think the way we've managed to produce it, it's a lot more user friendly in terms of flicking through it. And if you want to read more about an event, you just click one of the buttons and it gives you the whole spiel of what the event is. And again, it's all bilingual, which again, we usually try and promote the Irish language through the festival.
We've talked a lot about the big festival, the August festival, but of course it's one of 3. And in between that, laced in between that, we have the individual, almost special events that Féile put forward. So we have Féile in Yari, for instance, and we have the whole Halloween fireworks and all of that. Or we had, so with all of that, how do you get a minute? How do you get a minute to yourself?
It's a good question, and probably one that I would like me to answer. Honestly, Joe, I mean, to be fair, you don't. You just dive into it. You know, 100 mile an hour, literally 7 days a week. But you don't necessarily feel it as it's. You don't get up in the morning and go, "Flip, I have to get out to work today," and then you're coming back and going, "I've just spent a day in work." I think the people who are involved in Féile, in terms of working in it, and even the volunteers in it, you kind of nearly just do it. And it's part of your DNA, so you don't feel it as a you know, it's not a burden on you to go out to work on the program, this big event. It's a privilege to be part of it all. And when you do get that bit of downtime, I think you nearly appreciate it that wee bit more. So, you know, I do try and spend as much time with the kids as I can, with family and doing family events. And it probably helps it that I'm involved in the GAA, Joe, because I coach a number of my kids. So usually when I get home from work, say 5 or 6 o'clock, you're literally coming straight home. You're lucky to get a bit of dinner in you. You're getting the kids into the car. And that's the first time you've seen them since you left them to school that morning. You're bringing them to training, so you have 2 hours with them at training. And then by the time you get home, you're putting them to bed. And then you're maybe speaking to my wife for the first time during the day. And we're sitting down for dinner probably at, you know, bloody 9 p.m. And then by 10, you're ready for the sack again to start another day. But as often as possible, you know, you do need that wee sort of step. You need to step back because Féile is quite intense. And when I started this job 10 years ago, I had a full head of hair, Joe, believe it or not.
I remember it well.
Whereas now, as you can see, I'm closer to where you are in terms of your hair follicles. But, you know, it does come with a lot of stress, a lot of pressure. But all that is offset by, I think, the feeling of pride and joy and purpose of what we're doing. And you see that year on year. I mean, I don't think there's many jobs you can actually see the benefits of what you're actually doing on a daily basis, and particularly in August when you see hundreds of thousands of people walking about the streets of West Belfast, literally with their chests out and feeling proud of the community they're in and just going, "We've done this. This is us." I'm not talking about me and our staff doing that. I'm talking about, you know, the ordinary Joe public walking about during Féile, feeling proud of their community. And for me, that just makes it all easier.
You mentioned earlier on the beginning of this, and we're in their last. You'll be glad to hear we're in their last 5 minutes. And I deliberately constructed these questions to be at the last because I think that you get enough of negativity from certain sections, particularly all political opponents of Féile, and certainly facilitated by individual journalists who seem to be readily available to criticise. And one of the things I remember, I think it was 2 years ago, I remember you appearing on a radio show in the morning and you explained that you had just left your children to school, that you were literally walking down the road and you were subject to a barrage of criticism, personal criticism, political criticism, geographical criticism, and then it ended up with, why do you let this band sing this song? Now, you handled it all very well, I have to say. But, you know, the intensity of putting all this together, and you said earlier that you are accountable to the community and a service for the community, and that's great. That's a breeze block on how you move forward. But does it affect your morale when you get this constant, nearly hearty annual attack on who sang what in the Falls Park and who wore what jersey on the Falls Road? And my God, do you realise that there's Irish flags out? Does that drain you? Does it make you angry? I'm sure it does.
Joe, see, to be honest, it's more frustrating in one sense. It doesn't make me angry. Very little things that make me angry, to be fair, and I try not to let things like that get on top of me, and just take them as they are and as you see it. And I mean, the specific episode you're referring to, you nearly know annually it's coming up, and regardless of what Féile try and do, certain individuals, certain media establishments, certain political opportunists, well, they're already gearing up this year to attack Féile, and they don't even know what we're doing yet. And I think, to be fair, that in one sense that's a measure of our success. That people are sitting back going, "Wow, look, this says this thing. How do we attack this? Let's not let these people do this." And I think that people from West Belfast, our community, we've suffered enough. We've always been able to stand up against any criticism, and don't get me wrong, criticism is warranted at times, and we have to take that on the chin. But when you see some of the elements that attack Féile year on year, where that's through political attacks, where it's other communities attacking us, where it's radio stations or certain reporters, to be fair, a lot of it now just goes over our head. We know it's coming. We know how to deal with it. We know what we're doing. The right thing to be doing. And what those organisations don't do, Joe, is they don't pay credit to the likes of Féile for the job that we do year round. Working in the background, right across the community, looking at how far we have come as a community and the progress that has been made. And Féile has played a part in all that, in terms of the programmes that we put on, in terms of the outreach that we've done, in terms of the showcase that we provided for this community. And anytime you're doing something so well, those types of people aren't as quick to knock your door and ask you for an interview. So to be fair, I mean, we've got very, very used to knowing when these attacks are coming. We know how to deal with them. And to be fair, at this stage, there's a lot of it we just ignore now. We just let it play out, on the radio waves and whatever, because some of it just doesn't warrant comment. Because it's the same old, that some people just can't get over the fact that Féile is the biggest community festival on this island. It's the most successful festival. It's welcoming over 100,000 people in. It's showcasing West Belfast as a proud, resilient, strong, talented, courageous, cohesive community. And we've seen even over recent times, some of those same establishments once again attacking the community of West Belfast. And I think what West Belfast always does best is comes together and stands tall and proud. And Féile has always been a vehicle for that. Even though it's usually those 10 days in August, it's a microcosm of what this community is about, 365 days a year. And we'll never allow anyone to attack this community without standing up for ourselves. And through Féile and other events and activities, we have done that over the years.
I was, in asking that question, you may know this answer anyway, what I was doing, I was looking at other festivals, looking at other events. And there is no festival that's, as you say, is beyond criticism. There are festivals that unfortunately are drug-ridden. There are festivals where there are injuries to people through fights or people have died. None of them, without exception, are the subject of the sustained negativity directed towards Féile. So I deliberately left that question to the end, and I left it to the end because it's not going to be in my parade. That's for definite. The last question, and then we're going to say cheerio. The last question is that we need a Féile expose to be the second part of this book. We need the stories about the panicky guests, the idiosyncrasies of rock groups or folk groups or however they may be. In other words, we need Kevin Gamble, my story, here's how it happens. Is it likely to be seen anytime soon?
Don't be writing my obituary just yet, Joe, please.
Kevin, you've been a wonderful guest.
No
I
bother.
want to leave you with the last word about Féile.
Yeah,
So,
well, if I could just once again say how much of a privilege it is for me to work for this great organisation, and which embodies, I think, the spirit of West Belfast. And if I can encourage you this year to join the Virtual Féile, engage in it, watch it, spread the great news that is Féile. Go onto our website, watch it on your TV with friends or whatever. But importantly, engage in it and feel part of it all, and tweet it and tell all your friends about it.
on those final words, you've been listening to Scéalta. My name is Joe Austin. My guest has been Kevin Gamble. Kevin, Gormila Man.
Hi, Joe. Grandma, Slán.